Hey guys, this video is of a question I did while recording the Q&A and I went off on a huge long rant about that I feel is rather important just as a topic on its own. So since I spoke for so long about it, I thought I'd do it as a video. I'd really like to hear some feedback on what exactly is going on with Scarlet Briar and how I think she is a scapegoat.
Be afraid of dragons. Very, very afraid.
AWP, how do you feel about ArenaNet's lore quality in Guild Wars 2 overall? I noticed I have lost faith that they'd really bring us interesting and deep story, which also involves lore from Guild Wars 1. Is it possible to compare Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2's story quality? Do you also feel that Guild Wars 2's story is lacking a bit? If so, what do you think causes them to feel so differently? This is a lot of questions, but he goes on. For me, the antagonist should always be the most interesting of characters. I try to convince myself that Scarlet isn't mad and entertain myself with questions of why she is how she is. She should surely have a lot of reasons and motive from her perspective. However, all of the living story is forcing me to accept that she's just crazy. This makes her a boring character and makes me not care about the story behind the living story. Now, why have I picked this question? Because there is a lot of this in the community at the moment. Scarlet had a reveal in the Fractals content, which is probably still the footage in the background unless it's World vs. World, and people freaked out. One person left a comment that I love the way he termed it, being galactically disappointed that Scarlet showed up in the Thorman overreactor. Now, why is this so? She is the subject of pretty much everything we're seeing in the living story. We should be excited to get more about her story and her character and what she's doing, but instead, the community is just repelled. Now, why is that? First of all, to your question specifically, the whole first part here, do you feel like the story's gone downhill? I really do think it has. You're just looking for affirmation there that it does feel worse, and I would definitely be in agreement there. I mean, personal story was bad enough. Tons of branches, loads of character deaths, tons of key plot elements could be completely missed. You might not even know what that airship is or the technology that went into defeating Zaitan the whole way through the personal story of Guild Wars 2. That was bad enough. The living story is worse, and people are realizing this. But I feel that Scarlet is actually not that bad of a character. And all of the hate you see on the forums for Scarlet, really she's just a bit of a scapegoat. I tweeted this out the other day. I fully believe that everybody thinks Scarlet's the big problem. Oh, if it wasn't Scarlet, if it was another character, I'm sure I'd be enjoying the living story. No, you wouldn't. It doesn't matter what kind of character they could have come up with there. The problem isn't that Scarlet's mad, or that you don't like her voice, or you don't necessarily like her visual character design, all of which, by the way, are things that grate on me slightly. These aren't the real problems why you don't enjoy the living story. The problem is the way that the living world works and the opportunity they actually have to tell that story. We all know that the living story has been dragging on for a very long time. And really, if you look at everything we've seen now, even back to the original Flame and Frost content, everything can be tied to Scarlet. But where has that story moved? What does this mean? We know that she's got some motivations. We know that she's not entirely crazy. You know, people say, oh, she's kind of like the Joker. She's like a 50-50 character. She's got half insanity in her, but also half a lot of real things you can relate to and interesting motivations, theoretically, that are there. But the devs haven't given them to us. So we've had this massive swath of living story content that has given us a character that hasn't been able to move anywhere. That's the problem. It's got nothing to do with Scarlet's individual attributes. And I think that's a very complicated and difficult thing for ArenaNet to address. They have all these different people working on completely different types of content. One week they've got to make a story for why the Super Adventure Box is going on. The next week they've got to make a story for why Tequattle's going on. The next week they've got to make a story for why we're going back into the Fractals of the Mist. And they've also got to try and tie all of that into some larger plot. And exactly how much story element they can add into every single little release probably isn't up to the writers themselves. It's just based on the whims of the developers and where they can stick an NPC in here or there, or where they can show us a cutscene. It's very difficult. The way that they're designing it has to be drastically revamped and start off with the story at the fore. You make sure the story is solid, you have all of the characters planned out, all of the key events planned out, all of the cutscenes, all of those specificities in place, and then you ask the designers to build compelling content around it. I feel like maybe the big problem right now is that they're doing that in reverse, and the story is somehow being sort of slapped onto vague ideas that the designers wanted to do. Oh, we want to do kind of a new area where you jump around a lot. Okay, right, so we got to make a story for that. Well, what about this idea of the Zephyrite? And maybe we can tie that into Glint a bit. They're doing it in that order, and because of that, and then the next content team decides, no, okay, so now we want to do something based on Queensdale. Oh, but we just set up all this stuff with Glint. Okay, well, this Glint stuff that we do is probably just going to have to be sort of a setup for later, and we have no idea when we're going to go back to it, but we have to just have it as a setup because these guys are going to go do something else over here, and we want the living story. And you know, they might have all these top level decisions that sound nice and fluffy, like, okay, the living story is going to impact all of the areas of Tyria right now. So we want to have releases that are going on in Kryta, we want to have releases that are going on in the Tarnished Coast, we want releases going on in the Ascalon areas, and because of this, all of these reasons, these top-level decisions about what was going to happen in the living story has impacted the way that the writers can develop it. And so you see, it doesn't matter who Scarlet is. Scarlet can be a cool character. Western culture and media over the past 50 years has demonstrated that insane jokerish characters are perfectly reasonable and audiences are willing to buy them. Everybody loves a villain that you can like somewhat sympathize with, and they're trying that. That's there in Scarlet. You can kind of sympathize with Scarlet and how she just wants to be free of the influences of the Pale Tree, and she wants to learn more about the universe. I'd be exactly the same as her. I don't want someone determining my fate. I want to go and explore the universe, and it's caused her to become cracked in some way and differ from what we feel the rest of the citizens of Tyria would do, and she's going on these murderous sprees, but she's kind of relatable. Scarlet is an interesting character. It's just they don't have time to explore her and put depth in her that is required to make us like her more, to empathize with her more, and to really understand her motives. Her motives are the biggest problem right now. If that had been laid out months ago, if we knew what she was trying to do and we saw that it was coming to an end game, then I feel people would be more happy about it. But these things haven't come about, and it's because of the living story and the way they are developing the living story and how they need to learn how they're going to incorporate the lore into it. So all these people on the forums that say, oh, I hate Scarlet, Scarlet needs to go, why aren't we dealing with the Elder Dragons? That's the big one. Why aren't we dealing with the Elder Dragons? It doesn't matter. You really think that if we were dealing with the Elder Dragons, these problems wouldn't exist? You really think even in the first place with the personal story of Guild Wars 2 that the Elder Dragons were done justice? Is there a single person on this world that wasn't disheartened and disappointed when they came out of that Zytam fight? The answer is no. And that's going to be even more disjointed, even more difficult for the devs to deal with if they're going down the living story route and they're only just getting to grips with it. You should be thankful, if anything, that we're getting Scarlet, that they're not diving into old lore. That's the other thing everybody wants. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Elder Dragons. People just want old lore. You've got Guild Wars 1 players that want them to go back to all the mystery set up from the first game, and you've got Guild Wars 2 players that saw some vaguely interesting stuff to do with the Elder Dragons that want them to at least honour the Guild Wars 2 new elements of the lore that were incorporated into the game. And they're not doing any of that. They're giving us completely new alliances, completely new mastermind character, and in some occasions, new areas, like the Zephyrite Sanctum. That wasn't a place that had any significance before. We'd never heard of a Sanctum. They're giving us all of this new stuff, and again, people think this is the problem. No! I think there is plenty of opportunity for the writers to compel us by completely new stuff that they add to the game. The Zephyrite Sanctum itself, I would say, is a pretty good example of that. A lot of the stuff that they've done in Halloween 2, the Bloody Prince maybe aside, is still a pretty good example of that. They're doing interesting things with the Mad Realm, and they have expanded that lore into new territories. They don't constantly have to go back to the old stuff. And this has come from me. Like, I'm a diehard Guild Wars 1 lore fanatic. I really want to see answers to stories like what happened to Avinia and Saul D'Alessio, and go back to the Bloodstones and see what's been happening in Cantha and find out what the Tengu are doing in the Dominion of Winds. I want to see this stuff, but I'm thankful that we don't. And it's a deliberate decision that they're making. I don't think it's because a lot of people make the suggestion or might surmise from what's going on with the living story that ArenaNet have new writers that simply don't give a crap about the old world. They just decide, right, this was all okay, it was sort of fun, but we're doing our own thing now. We like the Sylvari way more than anything else, so we're going to have all of these Sylvari characters. We're just going to do our own thing, because all of that other stuff's boring. And they're not true players. They don't really care about the lore. They don't care about it as much as us. That is probably not true. The answer is that they've got this really difficult thing that they're trying to do with the living story. They're finding their feet, they're still balking stories that they put into the game, and they're doing us a service by not going back to that old stuff. If they showed us an Elder Dragon plot with a living story right now, you would all hate it. And it would probably make you lose faith that the living story is ever going to be any good, because now they've trodden in good territory and broken it once again. Once they can show me that they can add new characters like Scarlet and new areas, and make them compelling, which they absolutely can. Not everybody is some closed hermit that has to have old lore for them to actually be compelled by it. Once they can prove that the living story can be compelling in new territory, then I will be happy for them to go back to the old lore. This is a big reason why I was so tentative about doing the Abaddon Fractal. And honestly, in retrospect, now that the patch is out, I probably would have been sorely disappointed by the Abaddon Fractal had they released that instead of the Thormanova Reactor. The Thormanova Reactor was fun, but let's face it, it's maybe a 20-minute jaunt in a very small area, let's be completely honest. The scope and breadth I've talked about on my channel before that could have gone into the Abaddon Fractal with wars and it could have been unbelievable. And I feel like we've dodged a bullet, and I feel like we're dodging a bullet every day that Scarlet comes back. Once Scarlet is written well, then maybe we can look at other stuff. Scarlet is not a bad character in herself, it's just her delivery. Ideas are nothing, it's always in the execution. So in summation, I feel that people are sort of getting Scarlet a little bit wrong. I think Scarlet does have the potential to be a good character. They went out quite far and got a very nice voice actor for Scarlet. It's just their opportunities for us to really get to know her. And I do think they're a little bit clueless and a little bit lost with the direction, and there should have been a lot of things done differently. But I think it all really comes down to the living story strategy and the way they are working through that and the way they design how the living story goes. I am not disappointed at all about Scarlet. I would probably have a heart attack if they announced, oh, we're going to go back to some big old thing next living story patch. Really, I would. I'd be so concerned and ultimately probably very disappointed by anything that they tried to do to honor old stuff with the living story right now. We all know it's not great, but don't blame it on Scarlet. Don't tell us, oh, we need to go to the Elder Dragons. The Elder Dragons are not the answer. The Elder Dragons are far more boring than Scarlet was ever supposed to be. Just because they're deemed to be more powerful, all these great entities, it doesn't make them interesting villains. The Elder Dragons have never been interesting villains, and I'm happy to take a break from them until they can be properly honoured. And with that said, ArenaNet released today, it seems, a soundbite of Scarlet really talking about the Elder Dragons. So everything I've just said here, we might be about to move to the dragons, because the community wants it so desperately. I feel like this could be a mistake. The main thing I would just love to see happen, I was talking earlier in this video about top-level decisions, about the living story that sound nice in concept and are really getting in the way of more important things. I feel like living story, the story is in the title. The story should be much more of a priority than it currently is. For the amount of dialogue that we get in this game for every little patch, it is not enough. Living story, that has to be at the fore, and I feel like it really hasn't been. I really do. MMOs are big games, complicated games. There are a lot that goes into these patches. The story needs to be right up there as a priority, more of one than it has been so far, especially if they're going to be dealing with this stuff to do with the Elder Dragons going forward. Let's hope this really doesn't blow back in our faces. Let me know what you think. Am I completely wrong? It is a bit of a hot topic, so I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And have a great evening. I'll see you next time.